Homage to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. In today's session, we're looking at the physical nutriment and going the wrong way due to desire. So this is kabaḷīkārāhāro and chandā agati. So in the first part, we looked at the overview of the 4 nutriments and the 4 wrong ways. And we started to see how we are sustained by these nutriments, and that craving these nutriments leads us to the wrong ways. So these are unprofitable directions. And so in this particular session, which is part 2, we're looking at the first unprofitable direction. And largely the physical nutriment is really where we misapprehend form. So we take form as sabbe, as in we see it as pleasing, see it as fair, see it as beautiful, as opposed to seeing it as foul, repulsive, or unattractive. And when we misapprehend in this way, the mind gets corrupted, and what drives it then is things associated with sensual desire, sensual pleasures, and lust. And so what we'll see in the process that Buddha gives us, is that we go down this wrong way due to desire. And so we raise a lot of things associated with form higher than the supreme happiness of Nibbana. We've already been through this āhāraṭṭhitikā Sutta in Saṅgīti chapter 12, discourse number 11, which lists out the 4 kinds of nutriment as the physical nutriment, contact as nutriment, mental volition as nutriment, and consciousness as nutriment. And when the Buddha lists out what is the source of these 4 nutriments, what is their origin, what are they born and produced from, Buddha says that craving, tanha, is their source, craving is their origin, and they are born and produced from craving. So what we see when we look at the paticcasamuppada, the dependent origination, like how everything is conditioned, we see that craving plays a huge part, and we know that the second noble truth, the origin of dukkha, is craving. So these 4 nutriments are actually very important to understand for that very reason, because these are the things, this is the food that we go towards when we crave, when we have tanha. And when you don't abandon tanha, you don't abandon the craving for these things, then you cling in the wrong way, you want to come to exist, then that results in birth, and then that's the condition for aging and death, and then the whole mass of suffering, sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and despair. So if we take that a little further and we go to the Atirāga Sutta, which is in Saṅgīti chapter 12, discourse number 64, the Buddha says, if there is lust for the physical nutriment, if there is delight, if there is craving, consciousness becomes established there and comes to growth. Wherever consciousness becomes established and comes to growth, there is descent of name and form. Where there is a descent of name and form, there is the growth of volitional formations. Where there is the growth of volitional formations, there is the production of future renewed existence. Where there is the production of future renewed existence, there is the future birth, aging, and death. Where there is a future birth, aging, and death, I say that is accompanied by sorrow, anguish, and despair. So this is another way that the Buddha is explaining dependent origination in relation to lust for the physical nutriment. So there is a clear pathway that we go through when we have this attachment for physical nutriment, so kabaḷīkārāhāro. And clearly what happens is when we look at the map, when we look at this process that we go down in terms of going the wrong way, consciousness clearly establishes itself in the wrong place, as in it establishes itself to come back again for future rebirth. Because what it does is it misapprehends, so it takes something as beautiful or attractive or something valuable. And when it does so, it gets it wrong because it doesn't see the flaw. It doesn't see that there is unlastingness in form, that a form is subject to change. And therefore, you take it in the wrong way and therefore you establish yourself again. And the growth of volitional formations is the key, is because volitional formations, as we know it, they construct form as form, feeling as feeling, perception as perception, volitional formations as volitional formations, consciousness as consciousness. So when we misapprehend, it's a big deal. And so of course, when that happens, you produce another birth, which means you produce aging and death, and then the whole mass of suffering again. So it's pretty key that we understand these nutriments. And in this case, we're looking at the physical nutriment, kabaḷīkārāhāro. If you remember, the Puttamansa Sutta is the very good sutta for looking at the four nutriments, and that's in Saṅgīti chapter 12, discourse number 63. The key thing to draw out at this point is really what the Buddha says when you fully understand the physical nutriment, kabaḷīkārāhāro. The Buddha says, when the physical nutriment is fully understood, lust for the 5 chords of sensual pleasure is fully understood. When lust for the 5 chords of sensual pleasure is fully understood, there is no fetter bound by which a noble disciple might come back again to this world. So the physical nutriment, as you can see, is very, very important for us to understand, because it fetters us to a desire to keep coming back into another existence. And so when we really start to understand what the physical nutriment is and how we crave the physical nutriment, then we can start to untie ourselves from the physical nutriment. And so if you link that back to the sutta that we saw just before, the Atiraga Sutta, it's only when we get imbued with the lust, the poison that we've got from being bonded in so many different ways to the physical nutriment in our minds, and we keep going back to the physical form, that we create another birth, because consciousness establishes itself on form and steadies there and comes with the wrong desire for it. At that point, there is no understanding, there is no view that Nibbana is actually the only stable, unchanging, deathless, unconstructed thing. At this point, our view is corrupted. It's wrong view, and so that's why this whole process happens. So where we come to is that we really want to understand how we go the wrong way due to desire through craving the physical nutriment. And this is very key to understand that it is the wrong way. It's an unprofitable direction. Now let's look at what the Pethakopadesa says about the first unprofitable direction. And this has been gathered from different sections looking at the 4 nutriments and the 4 unprofitable directions. So it begins with the first nutriment is the first perversion. One steadied in the first perversion assumes sensual desires. This is clinging for sensual desires. One steadied in sensual desires assumes ties with covetousness. This is the body tie of covetousness. Herein, the taint of sensual desires is due to the body tie of covetousness. When the taints come to abundance, they are called floods. In this case, the taint of sensual desires is the flood of sensual desires. When the floods have reached their intention and are accompanied by underlying tendencies, they are called darts, and they strike the mind and remain there. In this case, the flood of sensual desire is the dart of lust. Consciousness gripped by the dart is steadied on 4 ideas. In this case, when infected by the dart of lust, consciousness establishing is steadied on form. By means of this steadying point for consciousness, one goes the wrong way. It is owing to lust that one goes the bad way through desire. So this is the process that we go down. And of course, when you initially take that into your mind, it doesn't hit you and penetrate. You don't realize the gravity of what that really means. But it is actually quite an important statement. And this process that we go down, starting with the physical nutriment and misapprehending it, is actually a very important one, because this is one that really triggers a lot of things to happen. And it is actually the greed path, it's actually the lobha path, because you end up choosing unwisely out of being flooded and bonded and pretty much embedded with the poison of subba rather than asubba, so the attractive instead of the unattractive. That's the poison. You're poisoned with the lust for something that you misapprehend, and so you keep choosing unwisely. The Buddha says that if you really understood Dhamma, if you really understood the First Noble Truth, then you wouldn't take form in the wrong way. You wouldn't take feeling in the wrong way. You wouldn't take all the other aggregates in the wrong way. And therefore, you would actually choose, have a desire for Nibbana, for supreme happiness, and not for something that keeps fighting, that is death-bound. One of the key things that is being emphasized by the Buddha over and over again is to have the right view. And this right view is the one that enables you to practice the Noble Eightfold Path, and that will help you to abandon any desire, any greed, any hatred, any delusion. And essentially, it will help you to abandon tanha, abandon this craving. So there's this sutta called the Chandā Sutta in Saṅgīti Sutta, chapter 22, discourse number 111. And the Buddha is at Savatthi, and he says, "Mendicants, you should give up any desire, greed, relishing, and craving for form. Thus that form will be given up, cut off at the root, made like a palm stump, obliterated, and unable to arise in the future." And then he goes on to say the same thing for feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness. So essentially the 5 aggregates. Now when it comes to desire, chanda, and this is linked to lobha, the greed path, essentially we're really saying give up all these wrong views associated with the 5 aggregates. And in doing so, then what you really see is the only thing that is not deceptive, that doesn't trick you, that is not lying to you, is Nibbana. And so what you hold on to as a desire is the desire for Nibbana. Everything else that is based on a lie, based on wrong view, you're giving up. And so when you look at this pathway that leads to going the wrong way with desire, you're really starting to look at the physical form as, when you take it as subba, like attractive, you really want to correct that, because otherwise it just leads you straight to chanda agati, going the wrong way through desire. Let's now go through the steps of how we go from the physical nutriment all the way down to going the wrong way due to desire. So this first unprofitable direction pairs with the first profitable direction, and that is the dukkha patipada danda vinya, so the painful way with slow realization. So when we look at this meditation, we're really seeing how does this craving arise for the physical nutriment, and how does all the bondage, attachment, and different aspects to it lead to having the desire to create another form, basically. So when we start with the physical nutriment, what we're looking at is any form that is gross or subtle that we take in the perverse way. So physical nutriment applies to any kind of object, including our bodies and other people's bodies. It includes food and any other objects that we take as food. So what happens is when we get to the vipallasa, the asubha-subha vipallasa, what happens is the perversion that there is attractive in the unattractive. Sometimes this is also fair in the foul, or beauty in the repulsive. And so when you take it in this way, this is when tanha starts to arise, the process of the arising of tanha. Because what we do is when we see an object known as the physical nutriment and we take delight in it, this is the abhinandati, that means we propel towards it. Then abhinavadati happens, which is we declare, wow, this is great, I'm going to enjoy that. Then ajosayatithati happens, which is you remain holding onto it, which basically means you make plans to have it again. And so at this point, what happens is you start to cling because you've taken delight in it. So nandi happens, and then you have the upadana. In this case, it's the karma upadana. So there is something that is saying, I rejoice, whatever this physical nutriment is. And you become attached to it. So at that point, if you're attached to it, then what's running in your mind is all these thoughts around karma, around sensual desire, around sensual pleasures. And so you get bonded to sensual desire. So there's karma yoga as a result of that, because instead of having a calm, restrained mind, the mind is gravitating in a very strong way towards what it has attached to. And so it could be food, it could be people, it could be anything that is considered the physical nutriment, some kind of form. And so you're taking delight in it and you're clinging to it, and now you're bonded because your mind is flooded with thoughts. So then when you get to the body tie of covetousness, you've already forgotten, how this has arisen. You don't see the samudaya tangama of any of this. That's not in your mind, how the physical form came to exist and how it passes away. You've actually completely gone the wrong path because of the wrong view about form. And so you don't see any construction in this. You don't see the slide in the physical form. You definitely don't see any aging. You don't see that it is death-bound, that there is a changingness in what you're grasping onto. And so you get tied to it because you can't see it. And so that's where the body tie of covetousness comes in. And so when that arises, the taint of sensual desire arises. So the taint of sensual desire is really something that we came into the world with. It's out of these taints that we haven't uprooted that we create another birth. So with the taint of sensual desire, what we're really saying is we expect to experience some kind of happiness or pleasure as a result of grasping onto physical nutriment. So when that happens, we definitely don't see any sort of anicca. We don't see the unlasting nature of things. We don't see it disintegrating. We actually don't see the sliding. And so we've missed a trick here. We actually just fully imbued with whatever it is we're grasping onto through sensual desire. And then as a result of that, we come to being flooded with sensual desires. So once the taint arises, so karmasava in this case, which is the taint of sensual desires, we have no choice but be flooded. We're drowning with it. Our mind is fully imbued with thoughts around it. I must have it. I want it. I'm going to enjoy it. I want to have it again, over and over and over. And so if you haven't got to that point, you're propelled to go and seek it out. And what really is driving all of this is this musa dhamma, that you've been deceived. You don't see all the truth around physical form. And so when you're flooded, you're literally drowning in it. And you have no choice really at this point. And there's no thought towards the truth. And there's no thought towards nibbana. So you haven't got anything in your mind that raises nibbana as something that is not changing, not deceptive, anything like that. Instead, you raise the physical form, the physical nutriment as the thing that's going to make you happy, that's going to fix this. So what's embedded with the dart of lust, this raga salla, is the poison of subha, that you think there is something attractive in the unattractive, and that poison keeps triggering you towards coming back towards this object. So there's a lot of coveting that is in there, and as a result of coveting, which is the abhijja, you end up in domanassa, but you don't see it at this point. At this point, you just have the poison. You're still going towards it. There's no sense restraint at all. And so what happens is this point of consciousness establishing or steadying on form is very true. You keep going back to the form. So in many ways, it's quite a dangerous situation. If one was to pass away at that point, then clearly out of all that strong desire and lust, one would create another birth again. And so that's a pretty dire situation. When you see this in your meditation and you take it in very strongly, you really see a few things. You see the power of sense restraint, why it's so important. you also see how important it is to see the First Noble Truth correctly, because when you see the physical nutriment that it ages, gets sick, and then is death-bound, then that's very valuable to know, because you wouldn't misapprehend the physical nutriment in that way. And we'll go through some examples that draw this out. And then the third thing is you realize that in our everyday life, how we've been conditioned, we're fully okay with seeing the deception of all these physical nutriments, the things that we usually gravitate to. And unfortunately, because we're conditioned so strongly in this way, none of us have this very strong desire for nibbana. And so when that danger is very real when we don't have this strong desire for nibbana. And the fourth thing is really that we keep misapprehending and we keep triggering the dependent origination as a result of having the corruption in our mind. So this meditation is very powerful in unlocking where we go wrong. And we can apply many examples to see through this. And so we'll go through a few examples in order to help us see this meditation more strongly. Let's take an example using actual food, because I think that's probably a nice way to start with this. So when you meditate, it's always good to use examples and plug it into the process, because then you take it into your mind a little bit better. If you keep it just at the level of these terms, it's very hard to understand what it really means. So we're going to take a series of examples that help us to see it. So the first example, let's say it's a piece of chocolate cake from your favorite cafe. So clearly it fits the definition of physical nutriment. So a piece of chocolate cake that is from your favorite cafe, kabaḷīkārāhāro. So we know what it looks like, we know what it smells like, we know what it tastes like from before. So the perversion that enters the mind is, oh, it's really good. You know, so when you talk to your friend, you say, oh, this is really great. That's my favorite cake from that cafe. And so already you have taken that as very pleasing. There's something attractive about it, even though that word doesn't fully fit. But sabbe is associated with taking something in that way. It's pleasing to you. You see it as fair rather than foul. You don't see the piece of cake as made up of ingredients. Like if you were to be given that chocolate cake as the flour, the egg, the cocoa, the chocolate, and so on, it wouldn't be quite the same as the final plate of chocolate cake. So the perversion is already in there, and you're taking it in that way that is probably more than what it is, that even the fact that it's your favorite. So clinging to sensual desires it's already set in. You know, you've already thought of it because it's already labeled as favorite. You're already thinking about it, you've spoken about it. Basically, tanha is there, the craving is there. The abhinandati, abhiwadati, ajosayatitati. I want to go and get that cake from my favorite cafe at the next opportunity. So clinging sets in at that point, so clinging to sensual desires. Then the bond sets in as well, because if you keep thinking about that cake and thinking about when you're next going to have it, then the bond of sensual desires kicks in. The body tie of covetousness becomes more apparent when you think, I really want it. So you wake up and you think, oh, today I really need to go and get that cake. I want it today. And then the taint of sensual desires has already kicked in, because in your mind, in the background, which you haven't quite picked up on, is, I'm going to be happy if I eat that chocolate cake today. So that's what's driving it. There is sukha if I go towards this cake and I drive out and go and get it. And so by this point, maybe you've spoken to whoever you live with, said, oh, let's go get this cake. Today's the day for the cake, so on and so forth. Or let's go and eat at the cafe so I can have this chocolate cake. You're already flooded with plans and ideas, and it's really what is propelling you. It might be, I can't wait until my working day is over so I can get to the cafe, or something of that nature. Or you think, I hope that it's still there in the shop and that they haven't run out because it's so good. And so when you're flooded like this, you reach karma auga, flood of sensual desires, you now reach the dart of lust. So you become quite gripped. The mind is quite gripped and set on this. So if someone was to say, oh, we can't go out today, you would be utterly shattered, because that dart of lust is really propelling you around this piece of chocolate cake. Now, of course, I'm winding it up a bit, but we all have scenarios, in our lives where it has come to something like this. Even in the middle of being restricted or locked down, there are thoughts that keep propelling us towards food, towards, I wish I could go to the supermarket and get my favorite snack food, or I wish I could go to that restaurant which is now not allowed to be open. It's the same kind of thing. We keep steadying on that particular item of food, physical nutriment, as a way even to get through difficult times. And so consciousness, what we don't see is that it keeps steadying on that item, that form. And so at that point we go the bad way through desire, because anything that we grasp onto that is death-bound is something that if we inherently keep doing it, then it becomes quite a bad habit. So that's why it's termed wrong way. Agati, it's a wrong way through desire. We desire this above anything that is more truth. Because at that moment, we misapprehend that chocolate cake, if you leave it out for 10 days, would we want to eat it? The answer is probably not, especially if it's left out to the elements, flies, insects, cockroaches, you name it. So we're not seeing the deterioration of it, not even that insects are eating it, but the fact that that chocolate cake, which was freshly made that day, becomes something that is over-ripened and probably is not fit to eat after 10 days. But that's what we always forget. It's a bit like when we go to the pantry cupboard and we see all these things that have expired. And that's the thing about food and physical form. It does have expiry dates. If you use an example of edible food, such as what we took with the chocolate cake, and you come back to the Puttamantha Sutta and the Buddha's simile of the sun's flesh, what's really apparent when you look at the explanation and the questioning that the Buddha gives towards the monks, then if you take it correctly, what the Buddha says is, what do you think, bhikkhus? Would they eat the food for amusement, davaya, or for intoxication, madaya, or for the sake of putting on bulk, mandanaya, and for beautification, vibhusanaya? And the monks answer, no, Venerable Sir. And the Buddha goes on to say, wouldn't they eat that food only for the sake of crossing the desert? And the bhikkhus answer, yes, Venerable Sir. So having meditated on one of your own examples, you can also meditate on the simile that the Buddha gives, which is the sun's flesh, because it's very powerful when it comes to edible food. Any food that we put on the table to eat, any food that we go out to restaurants and cafes to eat, then really, and this is what you do in your meditation, don't do it while you're eating, but in your meditation, what you're trying to see is to correct the view about food. Because food, what the Buddha is really wanting us to do is not to create more vedana, more feelings around food, because that means we go the wrong way all the time. We develop the wrong view and we develop the wrong path. Now, as lay people, we don't often get taught around food correctly. Often this is something that the monastic Sangha, it's emphasized every time they take a meal. But for us, it's very important when it comes to moderation in eating, this bhojane matanyu, which we've looked at in the Saṅgīti Sutta, that there's a reason for this. Because when we misapprehend food, it's one of the primary reasons why we come back again. Because there's this intense longing around how we've created these habits around food. And so when Buddha says, don't eat the food for amusement, this davaya, don't intoxicate over food, madaya, don't eat out of putting on bulk or for vanity reasons, which is the mandanaya and the vibhusanaya, there's a real reason for that. Because when we misapprehend and have these wrong views around food, and we keep taking delight, keep enjoying, keep making plans around food, then it actually blocks our path towards Nibbana. And so it's very important to contemplate, these 4 terms, and to use the Buddha's simile in our meditation to really penetrate it. Because then when you come out of meditation, you know that you don't want to go the wrong way due to food. And what happens is, in your daily life, slowly things start to correct themselves. You don't have to push it. It's actually in your meditation, it resonates. When you come out, it further resonates, and you change your habits gradually. And that happens naturally, not because you're pushing it. Because one of the things about the world right now is there's a lot of wrong practice around food. And when you get so intoxicated, you gain so much enjoyment about the process of eating, you create too many pathways for sukha. And so you obliterate any of the First Noble Truth. And food is the same thing as these bodies. It does age, over-ripen, it does decay. And food is also death-bound. So we would experience all kinds of different dukkha out of food as well, like the changingness of food. So we get the vipranama dukkha, the painfulness in change. We also get dukkha dukkhata when certain scenarios come up with the food that are not to the way that we like. So we go to dukkha dukkhata, which is the painfulness in pain, and then painfulness in construction when we actually see it correctly as well, even when it comes to food. So very powerful to actually use this simile to complete the understanding of food as the physical nutriment. When we take the physical nutriment in the wrong way and go the wrong way through desire, so in the last example we looked at food, so the chocolate cake, what we don't realize is that food plays a very big part in propelling us forward into future rebirth. When you pass away, what you remember is always eating, and so eating becomes what you miss, what you yearn for, and so it propels you forward into future birth because consciousness keeps steadying on form and in the way of food. So food is a huge reason why people are reborn. Now, if we take another example of the physical nutriment, we would take a loved one. What I find is the more attachment one has in our examples, it really helps to penetrate this Dhamma. So let's take, for example, a partner or someone that we love very deeply, very attached to, because we all have that in our lives, whether we have a partner or not, but we have someone that we're very, very attached to. And when we take that example, it hits home in a much deeper sense, because that example really tends to hurt when you start to see. And in that hurt, you start to really penetrate this Dhamma that the Buddha is showing us. Because until that point, you stay quite numb to this process and you don't see the danger of it. So what I find is the harder the example is in terms of how much one is attached to, the greater the benefit of looking at it. So with kabaḷīkārāhāro, taking a loved one, if you pop that into this process, of course you see this person as attractive. You don't see the aging, sickness and death process in this person. You always see the best of them. And so the subba vipallasa is really kicked in. Because most of the time in our everyday life we say, this person's not going to pass away. They're still young. They still have vitality. Nothing bad's going to happen. That's what we're conditioned to think, even from TV programming, through the internet. And of course, this is challenged right now during these global, pandemic times. But essentially, in the normalcy of life, it's always so far away. And so when we view each person, we don't think of death or sickness or old age. We always think they're looking really good. And they're always telling us we're looking very good and we're feeling great. So the perversion is already there. And so when the perversion is already there, when we see our loved one, we start to cling. We expect to see them every day, because we take delight in them. We eat with them every day. we do things with them, we have a routine. And so if one were to say, that's not going to happen tomorrow, you would be deeply upset. So you know that there is a clinging already there. The karma upadana is already there. So when we get to the bond of sensual desires, it means I have this very strong expectation that I will be with this person, that I can be with this person. And so the body tie of covetousness is this longing. I long for every day to be with this person, to build my life around this person. And I expect for this to happen each and every day. We make plans, we do things, we might have children, if it's a partner, or you plan your time around when you can see someone next. So the covetousness, one always thinks it's quite apparent, but with our loved ones, it's deeply ingrained there. Especially when you think, what if tomorrow they're not going to be there? There's an intense longing to see them. Like right now when we can't see some of our loved ones because of lack of the ability to travel and different rules and regulations in place, then this is getting very challenged. You really do see this body tie of covetousness, because why you get upset is because of this intense longing to see them, to freely be able to go and visit them if they don't live with you. And so the taint of sensual desires is really saying, I expect to experience sukha from them. My happiness is in them. So when your happiness is bound to other people, then you're flooded with sensual desires, because that taint of sensual desires becomes the flood of sensual desires. You know that I need them in my life. I really do need them. They are such an essential part of my life. And so the dart of lust is really understanding this raga comes from you have a deep passion for them, a deep longing for them. And it comes from subha, that you see them as subha and you have this expectation from sukha. So you see them as very pleasing to you and your happiness depends on them. And so consciousness, your consciousness is steadying on them. When you see them, it's always subha sukha, pleasing and happiness, pleasing and pleasure. And so when this happens, you go the wrong way through desire. Now we don't think it's the wrong way because they're our loved ones, but think of it this way. If you were to pass away at that moment with the breakup of the body, and your deepest desire is towards your loved one, what happens? You would want to propel yourself forward into another birth in order to see them again, to be with them again. So if our desire is not for nibbana, and this is the crux of it, if we misapprehend the whole process of the First Noble Truth, that there is suffering, that through birth, aging, sickness, death, and then the whole mass of suffering, if we misapprehend that and our strongest desire is not towards nibbana, which is a very wholesome one, it's a very kusala desire, then we must be breeding these other desires on the unprofitable side. And so when we misapprehend even our loved ones, we forget the First Noble Truth with our loved ones and we see form as subha. We think that we can get sukha from our loved ones. Then we have this unprofitable desire. We go the wrong way with desire. So this is a very powerful meditation, particularly when you use a loved one. So a few tips when it comes to this meditation. And the main thing is to have this intention, to make sure you understand this process, this insight or knowledge pathway that we've just been through. That how when taking the physical nutriment in the wrong way and having the arising of the craving and all the attachment to it, that it leads us to the wrong way due to desire, and to really see that. So what you start to contemplate is how the First Noble Truth is missing, that we forget, and when we forget the First Noble Truth, then wrong view arises. Wrong view leads to the wrong path and practice. So what we forget is that with the physical nutriment, it ages, gets sick and dies. That this whole process with the physical nutriment is death-bound. There's a changingness to the physical nutriment that we forget. And so we normally assume a lot of the other perversions that there is lastingness in it. And if we assume lastingness, then we always see subbe. And when we see subbe, then, and we expect some kind of happiness, then we take it as mine. So you start to trigger this process. And when you see that, you see the importance of the First Noble Truth. So really contemplate that as part of this process. The second part of that is to really correct the perversion. So the perversion comes at the perception level. It comes at the mind level, where we are imbued with thoughts that are perverse or corrupted with subbe, so fair or beauty or attractiveness. And then what we don't see is the asubbe side, and to make sure that we truly understand. And so the third part of that is our views. So perversions, if you remember, there's always three parts to it. So when it comes to subbe, we perceive incorrectly, we have thoughts which are wrong, and then we have these wrong views around it. So subbe, asubbe, vipallasa needs to be understood correctly. And then the other part to learning this meditation is really around memorization. That take the time to write down this process. Through writing you learn, also through reciting, saying it out loud, also through talking with others who are learning this. That also helps because it reinforces the process to understand it, because then once we really understand it, we want to know how to unlock it. And that means we match it with the profitable direction. And in this case, with the physical nutriment, what matches it is the dukkha patipada dana binya, the painful way with slow realization. And so you open up the doorway to nibbana through the first profitable direction, which is through metta. And it's a very powerful meditation. But the only way to compel yourself towards the first patipada is really understanding the unwholesome side, the unprofitable side, which is with this physical nutriment. So it's a strong encouragement to memorize the steps, take the time to really learn it well. And when you do that, and when you've memorized it, and you can do this meditation from your memory, what happens is you trigger the wisdom faculty, because when you memorize, that's when you sharpen your faculties, your spiritual faculties, and that's really important in this process towards walking the Noble Eightfold Path. And so when you do the meditation, take examples. I would suggest taking, edible food. So an example such as the chocolate cake or whatever is something appropriate to you. The other one is the loved one, because then you really see the attachment. And physical food and the loved one are very strong reasons why we construct another body. And the third one, which we haven't mentioned in any detail, is yourself, because our home, our abode, our home is really this body. And so when it comes to death, we don't want to lose this body. So that's what also propels us into another birth, because we're looking for another home, another body. And so when you put yourself as an example through this meditation, you see that very powerfully as well. And it's very important to break that wrong view. And the only way is to really incline towards Nibbana, but you only see it when you see with wisdom. So what is said is really that when you start to see the dependent origination, that craving for these nutriments, and in this case the physical nutriment, when you start to see that it leads to a further birth and therefore aging and death, this is how you develop the path. And then when you actually see that it leads to the whole mass of suffering, then what you realize is the fruit of the practice. And so this is a very important meditation to learn. And then as a result of doing this meditation, you start to see the value of sense restraint. And so the sutta that comes up is the one about the simile of the tortoise. That when the tortoise actually senses danger, so this is the ādinava, then what happens is the tortoise retracts its limbs into its hard shell, so its limbs and its head. And so when a fox or any other predator comes along, it's safe. So in the same way with us, it's through our sense faculties that we go out and make contact with the physical form and misapprehend. And so while we're still training, sense restraint becomes very important as a way to guard and protect us from the danger of going the wrong way through desire. And so you start to see that when you meditate more and more on this particular pathway. So we've now covered the first unprofitable direction. So in our next session, we'll look at the second unprofitable direction, which is contact as nutriment, and how we go the wrong way through hate. So we'll leave this session here. Let's share the merit with all sentient beings. May all beings be happy and well. May all beings be free from suffering. Blessings of the Triple Gem. Wishing you all well. Teruan Saranai.